Can everyone just please look at that exit door that's over there? Can you just all turn around and have a look at it, please? You looking at it? Now look at me. I chose to look the other way. I could have saved a life that day, but I chose to look the other way. It wasn't that I didn't care. I had the time. I was there. But I didn't want to seem a fool or argue over a safety rule. I knew he had done the job before. If I called it wrong, he might get sore. The chances didn't seem that bad. I've done the same. He knew I had. So I shook my head and walked on by. He knew the risks as well as I. He took the chance. I closed an eye, and with that act, I let him die. I could have saved a life that day, but I chose to look the other way. Now, every time I see his wife, I know I should have saved his life. The guilt is something I must bear, but is something you need to share. If you see a risk that others take that puts their health or life at stake, the question asked or the thing you say could help them live another day. If you see a risk and walk away, then I hope you never have to say, I could have saved a life that day, but I chose to look the other way. That poem was the start of my health and safety journey, my personal health and safety journey. When I read that out to my staff, it really hit the point of why I'm here as a manager. These are the people I look after and I'm responsible for on a daily basis. I want them to go home safely, and I encourage them that they encourage their workmates to go home safely. We're B&D Doors. We're 96 employees. We have 2 factories, one in Christchurch, one in Auckland, and we manufacture garage doors. So we make doors for residential homes and we make commercial roller doors for industry. Who we are is that we're part of the Dulux group of companies. We have the brands of Dulux paints, Dulux powders, Sally's, Yates, Cabot's, and we're B&D Doors. We're part of that group. We manufacture and we sell doors through our dealership network of Dominator and Garador. And we have about 70 dealers nationwide. A clear focus of our business is safety. It's an important part to all of the leaders in the business, and therefore we make sure it is part of our culture in our business. So I'm going to talk about our safety journey over the last 4 years. It really started for me just after I started with B&D Doors with the earthquakes, and I'll go through the various topics that you see up on the screen until we get to finally where our results are at the moment. So, like many of you here, we experienced the September earthquake. We all thought it was big, we all thought it was a pretty fascinating thing, but no one died. It wasn't until the unfortunate event of the 22nd of February 2011 that we had the earthquake, and it did have a huge impact on Christchurch, but really I just want to talk about how that helped begin our safety journey, and we were able to reopen our plant in 8.5 days. So like many of you, we were out in the east side of Christchurch, and our 4 buildings were severely affected to the point where eventually in June one of them was red stickered and we had to evacuate the site and find another site. The big thing that we learnt through that whole process was communication. We still do annual, we call them climate surveys of how people are feeling in our business, continually, even though we believe as managers and leaders of the business we are communicating effectively, we still get the feedback that we're not and we need to do more. We did, however, get a lot of praise out of the earthquake from our employees and their families. So we just communicated and communicated and communicated. We made sure that we got the right messages across to the people. And we chose that our message was that family and home was a priority, and the next one was that they were going to get paid. And then after that, we continued on with the progress reports about what we were doing to ensure that our business was going to reopen, and then also providing that ongoing emotional support for them. What we did do was that we didn't move any piece of equipment, or we didn't go into any area without doing a full risk assessment first. So we analysed what was there, what tasks we needed to do, what risks were involved with doing those tasks, and what we needed to do to mitigate those risks. We got through that whole process without injuring anyone. We've then introduced annual safety plans, and they are really very, very comprehensive plans. It goes right down to a daily level. The plan is based weekly, monthly, annually. We actually even put stretch goals in there, so we say, well, this is what we should be achieving. What we really want to achieve to show that we've done really well would be this sort of number. And both sites will achieve between 95 to 100% of their plans annually. We include a safety day once a year, and in that we have varying topics, usually full-on engagement with the staff with lots of activities, and then, does this work? Yeah. So it's not always sort of book work or learning. We also have, there were a couple of comedians that we got in to do something one year. We report on it monthly at a senior level, and we get asked regularly, why are we not on plan? Well, that doesn't sound right. We get asked, if we aren't on plan, how can we get back on plan? Our next big thing was project commitment. So that was our commitment to Christchurch and to New Zealand to stay in manufacturing in Christchurch. And we had to find a place and then move across town. So once we found a place, we had 12 weeks to complete that project. So again, 12 weeks after we signed the lease, we had to have our business operating. On the day that we signed our lease, we had myself and an engineer move in. Already on that site there were 4 tenants. So during that 11 to 12 weeks, we created a plan. We already had that plan prior to when we had a building, which was a generic plan based on whatever building we got, and then we had to modify it specifically. And then we managed to remove the tenants, basically. We had to get design, resource consent, planning consent, building consent, sorry. We had to upgrade the main transformer, take it from 300 kVA to 1 MVA, and we had to manage that around all our neighbours, which were sharing off the same feed. As you can see up here, I think our record was that we had 16 contracting companies on site on one particular day. So that's not people, that's companies. We achieved that in our 12-week period. We managed to stage move all of our production lines. We'd switch them off at one site and have them up and running at the new site in a maximum of 14 days for each shift. And we achieved that on time, in budget, with no resignations and no significant injuries and no disruptions to our customers. The point is that every day on that site, I drove the safety on that site. We had the toolbox talks, we did full risk assessments on everything, we did full inductions, we made sure that all the equipment that they were using was up to date and certified, and we sent stuff back that wasn't, or we ended up bringing the right service people in to get that fixed. But because we had a really strong safety plan within our moving plan, I'm absolutely convinced that is the reason that we were able to finish that project on time and in budget, and even better yet, without injuring anyone. On exactly that same day, so 5th of June 2012, back at our other site, also introduced an in-house training program. So that in-house training program, the goal was to train our people in lean manufacturing. So the manufacturers in here will probably understand what that is. I encourage those that aren't from the manufacturing sector to Google lean manufacturing and try and find a little bit more about it. Marcus mentioned it. I was vaguely aware of it, and it wasn't until we did this that it became really clear that New Zealand has a literacy and numeracy issue. The majority of the staff that we put through the training program had no formal qualification of any kind, and most of them had left before school leaving age or very close to school leaving age. So we had to invest heavily in improving their literacy and numeracy, and that has paid unbelievable dividends for our business, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We did that by engaging an on-site tutor. She came on site, she was part of our family for 27 months, and she would give 1 hour of one-on-one training to each of those employees on the course, on the condition that they gave us 1 hour of homework a week. They were probably given a ratio of 4 hours homework to every 1 hour that they were receiving tuition. It was made up of 5 compulsory subjects, and the top 2 are the ones that are probably relevant to this environment here, is that there are 2 health and safety modules that are tied up with NZQA, and they have level 2 credits associated to them. We also did a lot of manufacturing costing so that they also understood the business side and the business impact of their behaviour and their decisions, as well as their behaviour around health and safety. We then selected as a business 7 elective subjects. They are typically around improving manufacturing, but actually when you look into them and you go under them, they all reiterate and strengthen the health and safety message to the individuals and how they can impact the business. Marcus, again, he talked about the cluttered work environment and the trips and slip hazards and that. So 5S is a systematic method that has come out of Japan for helping to make sure that you have everything that you need and nothing that you don't need, and everything is in its place, so you can always find it close to where you need to use it. And then we had about half the group continue on to do a higher level certificate of competitive manufacturing. And really that was about moving on, so when the education was finished, they were in a position to continue driving their own change within their workplace. So when we moved over, that was one way that we were moving our coils around our factory, which is an engine crane. We've got the obvious one there of that we've got a mechanical device to lift up something that's heavy, but it's very hard to move around, and it took 2 or 3 people to be pushing that. We went to that. So it's quite an interesting story. That's at the previous place we would have just used an engine crane, and otherwise there were a few monorails there. We had no idea of the history of those monorails, whether they were there when the building was originally done 20 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever it was, or whether they just happened to be a beam and at some stage someone's decided to put on a crane on top of it. We just really weren't sure. These cranes have been mechanically designed, they've been certified, they were registered with the Department of Labour, which is now WorkSafe. They have a crane-specific number to them. We did not allow anyone to use that equipment until they were fully trained. And by fully trained, again, we put them through the NZQA registered qualification for using that type of crane. It's worth 10 credits within the NZQA system. And once they had passed that, we then put them through the SOP. We did a risk assessment of the whole process. We used that risk assessment to create our standard operating procedures. Once we had the standard operating procedures, we then trained our staff to those operating procedures on that specific piece of equipment. The great story that's in amongst that is that we'd started our training journey, and the question was asked, well, who are we going to train on how to use the crane? And I thought that was a really weird question. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, normally we train the people that can read and write, and we normally train our most intelligent people. And intelligent really is just a term of reference. It was how they perceived what intelligence was, and it was about, well, gosh, they can read and write, so they must be intelligent. The trouble was, they were never the right people to be doing the job. They were normally someone else that was reliant on somewhere else in the business for doing another task. So you had to go and get them to come back and do the job you really needed to do. So made a very firm decision. It says, whose job is it? Who runs those machines under those cranes? They were identified, and they were the ones that were chosen to go on the training courses. One of those guys, English was a second language. He had no formal qualification of any kind. He had never had a certificate in his whole life with his name on it. And he was very, very apprehensive about doing the training. The tutor you saw before, we got the prerequisite material for the training. We spent 2 weeks solid with him and her going through that process so that he could then go just attend the training course, and then she sat with him when he went through the examination. He passed that, he got his crane certificate, and that night he celebrated that with his family around the evening dinner table. Net result is I have a fully engaged employee that now knows how to operate a piece of equipment safely. When we moved in, we thought we were pretty tidy because the inside of the building was tidy, but our backyard was a shambles. We've improved our machine guarding. That has been one heck of a journey. We've had, in the 4 years, we've probably had 4 independent machinery audits from various directions. Bless their little cotton socks. We've had WorkSafe inspectors come in and inspect us. Very pleasant experience. But it was, jokes aside, they were good to work with. And what was pleasing was they identified the same things that we had identified as what were hazards in our business, and helped us with our plans to accelerate getting the finances to address some of these problems. So the sorts of levels that we've moved up to is that we had this is one of our main machines in here. It was fully guarded around the machine part. We had full interlocks on that, and we were all patting ourselves on the back, and we thought that was a really good progress. The trouble is the product comes out into an exposed area where our people are. That product's driven, and potentially there is the risk there of cutting someone in half. Again, we thought we were pretty clever, and we had put in a safety gate in here so that we could get through, so if anyone ever went through, that would stop the machine. What we didn't count on was, well, what happens if someone leans across into that area? They would actually lose their fingers. So with WorkSafe, with our own integrators, we came up with a method with light beams to protect that area. We've also got light beams here protecting the behind area. We've put in magnetic coded switches. We've ended up, the next level is we're buying equipment now that we're getting told is fully safe and okay to use. But then we do our full risk assessments on it once it arrives. We look at the standards of AS 4024, and we say, well, actually, is it really safe to be using? And we've added on tunnel guards each side. We've changed the circuitry in here, so the 2-button switches are actually momentary switches, so that they can't be, they must be pushed within a few milliseconds of each other. We've also put on coded magnetic switches at the back as opposed to just a simple micro switch. So effectively we've got a saw that anyone in our factory can use and can't get their fingers anywhere near the hazard. Done the same for our presses. They're fully guarded, 2-button controls. We put anti-freefall devices at the top. We have, again, we're aiming at so that anyone can use those without injury. We're at the point now where we're upgrading our safety processes and systems. We have full isolation, permit to work processes, lockout, tag out processes. Permit to work is basically any non-standard work that's not covered by an SOP. We'd create an on-the-spot SOP effectively. So we go through, we do a full list of the tasks, we risk assess, we reduce the risk, and then we proceed with the process. The results, we've got 23 people qualified with an NZQA qualification in manufacturing. The big thing is that we have ownership of our safety improvements, so these are all people on the floor. They've come up with ideas to improve productivity and safety. 4 years ago, that gentleman would never have spoken to anyone on the floor. He's now driving improvements in his area, and he's talking to a local MP there and another member of one of the political parties. Ideas, we're starting to get ideas from the shop floor, again through the training. A lot of them are around health and safety. This is how we used to load these pallets. These guys have come up with, and they said, look, if we create this little table with the parts that we need right next to where we want to go, we can load up our component boxes and we can slide them across to this pallet lifter. That pallet lifter we got for free. We reconditioned it through Crown, and then the team painted it, cleaned it. They've set up their own standard operating procedures around it. They put a maintenance program in place. They've marked out on the floor where they want to keep it. They own that whole process now, and they have removed that risk. Firewood, we had pallets for Africa out the back of the place. Again, a couple of employees, they came to me and they said, look, we want to take all those pallets away and give them away to people in our street. We want to use them in our homes for firewood, and we want to give them to local church members. I said, yeah, no problem. They did that. It took them 3 days over the holiday break. They hired the trailer, paid for all that themselves. They came back to me and they said, look, Paul, there's a business case here for the company to buy a trailer. This is what it's costing you to dump the wood. You can pay for a brand new trailer in 4 months. We did that. The staff now load the scrap timber directly into the trailer. They borrow that trailer on the weekends and they take it home and give the firewood to their communities. Our next steps, we're onto the journey of fatality prevention protocols. So we're well down the track of falling from heights, racking. So we've got full protection on the back of our racking. It's all fully certified. We're in the process of upgrading all our forklifts because, again, we've identified forklifts are a fatality risk. Transportation's a fatality risk. We're working on that, and we've got about another 8 to introduce. We're upgrading our traffic management plan. We've got an electrical audit this year. We've got a risk management audit, and we're going to do another disaster recovery scenario if something else went wrong in our area. What we're proud of, we've just gone 5 years LTI free in Auckland. That was 2 days ago. We're 4 years LTI free in Christchurch. We're 15 months medically treated injury free in Christchurch. We've passed 3 ACC audits, 2 in Christchurch and 1 in Auckland. We've obviously got the 23 staff trained in health and safety, but the big thing is that we have very low staff turnover and we're experiencing business growth. I'll leave you with that last message. And from my point of view, that's what it's all about.